Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Krabby Terror 8 and welcome to part 2 of the Investigator Games with our second contestant, Daisy Walker. Just a couple of things before we kick off with Daisy on this first scenario, the Gathering in the Night of the Zealot scenario. First of all, just an explanation again for those who might be new to this channel. We call it the Investigator Games because we essentially pitch each investigator against each other in solo matches with their starter decks to see how they go, and we can then put them into a league table at the end, going through with each investigator. We started last week with Roland, and this week it's with Daisy, and next week we'll kick off with Schizo Tool. So before we start, also just a big thank you to everybody who watched the first video. I really do appreciate the people who took the time to watch it. A big shout out to Chick Lewis on BGG, who also left some excellent feedback on some of my gameplay. Thank you so much for that, particularly the piece where on my timing, where I had Malign Christopher out. I had a Ghoul who I had down to 1 health. I then brought out the guard dog, replacing Malign Christopher. I took the damage from an attack of opportunity and killed the Ghoul. I did that in the wrong order. I should have taken, that shouldn't have happened. You take the damage first before the replacement. So it wouldn't have made a massive difference to that scenario. I don't think it would have delayed things a little bit, but I think the scenario would have played out pretty much the way that it was, but it was an important error and in terms of what happens when. So I appreciate that feedback. I know from watching other people's games as well, it is very easy to make mistakes and errors, and I always appreciate the feedback. It's how I learn to play the game better. So thank you very much for that. So I spoke to Daisy in the green room before we started. She acknowledged that Roland had done a pretty good job overall, and that she certainly had quite a high standard to follow, given that he got through the scenario pretty quickly. He got all of the clues, and he defeated the Ghoul Priest relatively fast. So I think Daisy feels confident. Obviously on the clue side of things, she told me that getting the clues is never an issue for her, usually. Obviously she's got 5 intellect, so that's never an issue. The issue for her, of course, is around fight and evade. Daisy acknowledges that Roland has an advantage from a fight perspective, so with Daisy, her focus obviously is to get through the clues and then likely either use her shriveling to dispatch the Ghoul Priest, or perhaps parley with Lita Chandler, bring her in, if nothing else as a health and sanity soak, but also just to help dispatch with the Ghoul Priest as well. That's something Roland, he didn't do. And actually I spoke to Roland in the green, not Roland, I'm sorry, I spoke to Lita in the green room as well. She's a little bit annoyed that Roland didn't come and have a chat to her and bring her into the fray. She enjoys fighting the Ghoul Priest. She feels it's something that she likes to do in these sorts of scenarios, even though it really messes up her plan for what's going on. She certainly enjoys doing that. So the fact that she was left out, she's hoping that Daisy will pop over to the parlour in this scenario and get her to help out, which may be distinct possibility. I spoke to the Ghoul Priest as well. The Ghoul Priest obviously feels like a punching bag a lot of the time in these scenarios, and is expecting and hoping that in this particular scenario, particularly with the Retaliate trait, that he can actually do some serious damage to Daisy Walker. In this particular scenario, he's very much looking forward to ensuring that not all these investigators finish this scenario. He gets a little bit annoyed that he's been placed in a scenario, in this first scenario, which is relatively easy. He can turn up later, of course, which he very much enjoys, but he often thinks this scenario is a little bit too easy for investigators to dispatch him, particularly now that it's been around for so long. Everybody knows he's coming, whereas in the earlier days he very much enjoyed being the surprise package that dispatched investigators. Maybe less so these days. So it was interesting talking to them all. As I said, there is the general perception that Roland did a pretty good job. So just on that, I've just got the starter deck here. Especially these days, it's sometimes hard to, I certainly find it hard to remember the starter decks and what are in them. They're not exactly optimized based on the cards that are now available, but just a couple of things I wanted to just point out just for my own thinking around how I'm going to approach this with Daisy. And I think the first thing I want to just point out is this is what we drew as the basic weakness. This was a random draw, which thematically doesn't feel like a Daisy weakness, to be honest. Feels more like something that Zoe might. It thematically goes very nice with the Zoe deck. Obviously, it's quite a nasty card because essentially you draw 2 cards from the encounter deck. So it is a nasty card that Daisy has been put with, but that's the way that it goes. It's a random draw. So we're hoping that we won't get that, but the problem is that one of the best cards in the whole damn game is Old Book of Lore. I really like this card. Essentially, particularly with Daisy, who can draw an extra turn for a tome, it essentially allows you to draw an additional card every time. Problem or the downside of that is obviously the more cards you draw, the more likelihood you are to draw out your weaknesses. So that can be a little bit of a challenge, particularly if you're getting to the end of your deck. You've got about 5 cards left. I mean, it does allow you to also avoid weaknesses, particularly earlier on, but as you're getting down to a fewer in the deck, which is probably why it's probably a good thing if Daisy can get through this scenario relatively quickly, particularly if the Old Book of Lore is on the table. So from my perspective, very much the Seeker cards like working on a hunch, and of course deduction and magnifying glass indeed, and let's not forget Dr. Malign Christopher. All these cards are really great, ensuring that Daisy has no problem getting clues most of the time. She can do that relatively easily. She's also got perception, of course, but with Daisy, that's maybe something for perhaps parlaying with Lita or something else when we really need it. The main thing with Daisy for me is the fighting piece. There's only one shriveling in this deck, which if I was building this deck myself, I would have more than one shriveling. So really it's quite at a premium in this deck because we've got shriveling and we've got knife, obviously, to help there, and then I suppose we have mind over matter as well, but really we don't have a lot of ways to dispatch the Ghoul Priest particularly effectively. And if we add on top of that Daisy is not the world's greatest most nimble investigator, so it really means that I think unless I'm sitting there with the Ghoul Priest with a full set of charges from shriveling, I'm really going to be hoping I can get Lita Chandler on board, I think, to really ensure that we dispatch the Ghoul Priest without too many problems. That's why I think it really is quite critical with Daisy, even more so than I think with Roland, that the right cards are out. Also the big shout out I want to give to is Arcane Initiate. I love this card. Again, there's only one in here. I would usually try and rock 2 of these because even though you put a Doom on, I mean, if you play Arcane Initiate in the Witching Hour, which is when there's already the agenda's going to flip anyway, it doesn't matter if you then load up with extra, and that's time to particularly bring out the Arcane Initiate. The other thing, of course, is that often for more experienced people in the game, there's usually plenty of time to kind of get ready for things, particularly a little in the mid part of the game. So adding a Doom at that stage is not a huge deal either, perhaps if it means having the Arcane Initiate, particularly if we don't have Shriveling Out. So all in all, I'm very much looking forward to this. This will be a very different play to Roland, but I think the first thing is to get the clues, get all of the clues. Roland got all of the clues. No reason why Daisy can't get all of the clues as well. And then it's really about making sure we've got the right cards to take out the Ghoul Priest, probably with Lita Chandler in tow as well. That's the plan anyway. So let's kick off here in Octagon. I'm just going to close and shuffle the deck. There we go. So just to set the scene here. Yeah, we're late night. We're holed up in our study, and with Daisy, no doubt, searching through another tome, researching the bloody disappearances that have been taking place in the region. A few hours into your research, you hear the sound of strange chanting coming from your parlour down the hall. And at the same time you hear dirt churning as if something were digging beneath the floor. Now I'm sure with Daisy this would be concerning principally because she's got one hell of a library. I imagine she probably nicked a bunch of books from the Ulm library, which she hasn't returned them. I imagine for Daisy, just looking at her face, I'm imagining that's like her response, oh my goodness, I can't have these wonderful books that I've nicked / not returned, or should be returning, anything happening to them. Unfortunately it's 1920, so having security fire retardant systems in your house is probably unlikely. So really it's not a good place if you're a lover of books like Daisy is. So Act 1A is trapped as you leap to investigate, which I think leap should be in inverted commas here if you're Daisy. With a vitality of 2, I doubt Daisy leaps to anything very much. It's not really, partly because she's just used to sitting around all day, but usually she's got a heavy tome or 2 on her person, which probably with her tote bag and things probably makes it harder to leap anywhere. So if I was writing this for Daisy, I would probably say as you slowly get up to investigate, the door to your study vanishes before your eyes, leaving behind only a solid wall. And Daisy's first thought, I mean, she's got very high sanity, so I don't get the feeling Daisy is particularly perturbed by things. So probably her first thought is, there's another opportunity for a bookcase, before she then thinks, well, it's probably not the best that the door is gone. So you're trapped inside your study, which again for Daisy is not the worst thing, surrounded by books. But you know, she will be recognizing that she needs to find another way out. So there we are. Daisy, I'm going to put some actions on her as well, and I won't use the menu again. I should be actually using the keyboard here. Just click on Daisy. 3. Righty ho, here we are, kicking off the gathering with Daisy Walker. So let's kick off. Let's draw our 5 cards and let's see what we get. So here we go. Medical text tome, very nice. That's allows us to heal, so that's a very nice card to get. Milan Christopher, well, that's a great card to get at the beginning of the scenario because it allows us to fuel our resource. Not so much the actual clue gathering because it's quite high, but it allows us to do that. We've got also deduction, which allows us to get a lot of yellow cards here, which again is good in the early part of the game. We don't really need it in the latter part of the game. Then we have overzealous, so that we don't use that. So 3, 4 flashlight. I'm sensing a bit of a trend here that practically everything we're gathering is for clues, which is a little bit of overkill, I think. And then finally, emergency cache. Now, if we've got Malign Christopher, we probably don't need emergency cache at the beginning if we hadn't drawn Malign Christopher. So it's really about, do we go with Malign Christopher or do we go with emergency cache? I'm going to leave out emergency cache. I really don't think we need flashlight at the moment. And to be honest, I guess it's a tome. So do we keep the tome? Do we keep deduction? I mean, that speeds things up for us in terms of 2 clues at a location. So that allows us to do things much faster. I think that would probably be helpful to have medical text, but I am going to draw some more cards because we do need some more aggressive cards, some more spells, and at the moment we haven't drawn any of those. So we get Arcane Studies, which is okay if we have something to fuel that with, and finally we get Everybody's Friend in the Seeker decks. Well, I think practically Old Book of Lore. Well, that's good because we're going to need the Old Book of Lore to really help us search out for the spells that we're going to need in the second half of the game to complete this. So I'm pleased to see that. So we've got our tomes that we can bring out. We've got Malign Christopher, who can allow us to do more resources, and which would allow us to then fuel things like Arcane Studies, but also the Old Book of Lore. So I think that's not a bad draw. I would have liked to have seen a spell. Obviously, I'd like to see Shriveling. It's not the end of the world at the moment because it's a very early part. As long as we don't start drawing lots of ghouls from the encounter deck, we should be okay in the early parts of the game. So I'm going to put these back in and shuffle the deck. I've done that. So we have our 5 cards, we have our 5 resources, we're ready to go in terms of our investigation phase in turn 1. So we're ready to go. So let's kick off. I think the first thing to do is I always like to do this. I know some people like to start, well, we can't move around much anyway in this one, but I like to start by getting some actions down. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take some time to put down some of the things we have here. Now, normally I would probably bring out Malign Christopher first. However, I do like to bring out the Old Book of Lore as quickly as possible because I get an extra turn, although I could do that at the end. Just trying to think, because I get the resources. Yes, so I'm going to do that. So my first action, I'm going to pay for bring out Good Doctor, Malign Christopher. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Okay. So we can't pay for other things. Now I could use deduction, but I'm going to keep deduction for when we head to the cellar, because that's a little bit more difficult. And at the moment I actually want to maximize. So if I use the deduction, I succeed. The problem is I would gain a resource and get 2 clues, so I wouldn't get 2 resources, which I want to get for the Old Book of Lore. So for my second action, I'm going to investigate. So we are now at a 6 intellect against a 2 shroud, which basically means as long as we don't auto-fail, I think, I'm just looking at the standard, I think as long as we don't auto-fail, I'm thinking going to get that. So 6 versus 2. Chaos Bag says, well, there you go, auto fail. Oh, thank you, Chaos Bag. Oh, this game, I tell you, this game. For my final action, I will I will investigate again. Here we go, and we get a stone tablet. -2. If there's a ghoul enemy at your location, take damage. There isn't, so I get a clue, and that means I get a resource. Brilliant. Okay, we're off and running. Things didn't go quite according to plan, as they often don't. I was hoping that I would get 2 clues, but never mind. That's fine. That's okay. That's how 3 goes. So we're off and running. We have Malone Christopher out. We've got a clue. We've got a couple of resources. So hopefully that's our. I know the theory behind random draws, but I'm saying hopefully that's our auto fail out of the way for the rest of the game. I doubt it, but anyway. Okay, so let's move to the next phase, which is the Enema Phase, as I like to call it. Yeah, that joke never gets old. There is, of course, no enemies, so we'll move straight on to the Upkeep Phase. Yes, you might have noticed, if you had seen my last one, that every time I do the Upkeep Phase, for some reason, this little link here flips over. I'm not going to flip it back every single time. I don't know why it does that, but it does anyway. So we got another resource. We've got the magnifying glass, which again is, this starter deck is so overkill when it comes to clue discovery in this scenario. So whilst we could spend time putting that out, I've got better things to do with my hand slots than putting out magnifying glasses, because I'm already over delivering from that perspective. So that's all fine. We move to so that's the Upkeep Phase. I'll just put some actions back on Daisy, 3 actions. And when I bring out the Old Book of Law, I will also put a little resource on her as the additional action that you get for tomes, so it's really clear what we're doing. So here we go. That's the Upkeep Phase. Let's move on to everybody's favourite phase, which is the Mythos Phase. What does Cat Weasel? I watch Cat Weasel's Let's Play videos, and he refers to them as the laugh and chuckle phase, which is fantastic. So the Mythos Phase, Doom on the agenda. 2 more to go before that flips. So that's all fine. And let's see what the encounter deck has for us. Okay, we got the Flesh Eater, humanoid monster ghoul, who spawns in the attic. 4 fight, 4 hit points, 1 to evade. So an easy evader, tough to fight. I think even for a Daisy, this is going to be more of an evasion than a fight, but we will put the Flesh Eater into the attic. So there we go. Interestingly, Roland didn't spawn Flesh Eater and things, so he didn't have access to those victory points. I think the problem is that obviously we want to be able to get those clues as well. So it might be evasion, clue gathering, etc. So there we go. Flesh Eater is in the attic. About that, I just realised, obviously, that the Flesh Eater can't spawn in the study. even though the attic, I'm sorry, because the attic doesn't technically exist. I've put them all out for my own purposes to make things easier, but actually this shouldn't happen. The Flesh Eater actually is removed from the game if you're still in the study at the beginning. Apologise about that. I just took the time to just clarify that, and that's indeed the case. So I've taken that out of the game. So for all those people who are massively going and typing away, I realise that that's the case. So we can now move on. So I do apologise about that. Of course, if only the study had been in play like normally when I play this game, I would have. It would have been I would have readily realised that, but because I've got them all out just for simplicity's sake, of course the attic doesn't actually exist. So apologies for that small error, but that's fine. So I've actually gotten a free pass there because the Flesh Eater no longer exists. So the attic is now free, and that was actually a lucky draw in retrospect. So here we are with our first action of our investigation phase, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spend 3 resources. Spend 3 resources, take off an action, and bring out the old Book of Law. That's the old Book of Law. So that means I'm going to put a resource on here, which represents the additional action I can take when I have a tome, which is Daisy Walker's special effect. So she can only use this for tome abilities in that way. And in fact, I'm going to use it now. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to exhaust the old Book of Law. Oh, let's flip, not exhaust. Going to Ice F8, that's right, that'll do. Oh, that was a nice little exhaust. So I exhaust the old Book of Law, searches top 3 cards of his deck for a card, draws it, and then shuffles the remaining. So what do we get? We get Shriveling, we get Forbidden Knowledge, and indeed we get Hyper Awareness. So from my perspective, Shriveling is a no-brainer. We need that in our deck. Not right now, but you never know. So I'm going to put these back in and shuffle the deck. Okay. So that was our extra go. So we've still got 2 more goes left. Now that we've brought out the old Book of Law, we've got no resources. So I think it's probably time to do a bit more investigator here, and let's get this final clue from the study and get ourselves into the hallway. So here we go. Let's investigate. What have we got? We've got a 6 versus 2. Chaos Bag says, again, an auto fail. Wow, that is 2 auto fails in a row. Not 2 in a row, sorry, that's 2 in the space of 3 draws. That's unbelievable. That's alright. That's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. So that was our second turn. For our third turn, we'll investigate again. And here we go. Chaos Bag says -4, which actually is a pass because we're at 6 versus 2. So we get the clue, and we also get a resource as well because of Milan Christopher. So that's our 3 turns. So a couple of things. I nearly messed up with the ghoul spawning in a place that doesn't currently exist. We brought out the old Book of Law, etc. We Milan Christopher. We drew Shriveling from the old Book of Law. We investigated and failed, investigated again and succeeded. That's our 2 clues, so we can spend those 2 clues. Now, at the end of this turn, we can flip here, which, we You notice that the edges of your newly purchased rug are tattered and mud-stained. Finding this odd, you shift the furniture aside and pull back the rug. To your surprise, you see a door leading out of your study. You slightly turn the knob and the door swings open, revealing your hallway below. Fantastic. You jump through, and again, I think jump needs to be in inverted commas. I don't think Daisy's a jumping person, so I think it's probably slowly descend through the doorway. Landing on your feet on the soft dirt, she'd probably be holding the old book of law above her head, because we don't like getting dirt on that. The door of the study slams shut above you. The smell of burning wood fills the narrow hall. Now, for most investigators, that would be a concern. I think for Daisy, the fact that it's not burning paper would probably mean she's not so bad. Intermingled with the scent of rot and decay, as long as it's not rotting paper that we're smelling. So here we go. We discard the study. We put the hallway, the cellar, and the attic and the parlour in play, and remove the study from the game. So let's go ahead and do all of that. So we're here. This is gone, so that can be removed. Study is gone. Thank you. And I might try and get this back to normal, although it's probably futile. There we go, because we'll lose it again. Something I didn't do last time, which I will do this time, is flip the hallway. Even though there's no clues and things, I didn't flip the hallway last time, so thank you to the listener who pointed that out to me as well. Very much appreciated. So we flip the hallway. We now have the barrier. A glowing barrier blocks the path to your parlour. As you move towards it, intense heat forces you to back away, which I think in Daisy's would be particularly a concern if you've got the old book of law, which actually looks pretty charred already. Looks like it's already seen some better days. Yeah, it really should be called the Charred Book of Law, looking at it. But anyway, sorry, where were we? So, picking up a handful of dirt, you toss it at the barrier and watch in horror as the dirt incinerates. Perhaps there's something in the cellar or attic that can help. So really, it's now about getting back to the hallway with three clues to advance from this stage. So there we are. We got out of the study. Not quite as fast as I imagined we might have, but we're out of the study now. We're in the hallway. We've got the old book of law in tow, and we can start looking for further clues depending on what happens from here. So the next phase is the Enema Phase. There are no enemies to speak of, so we can move straight through to the Upkeep Phase. Well, that's interesting. It's gone backwards. It's completely flipped upside down. There we go. Is there another way to? Is there a flip? Control F. That's what I'll use. Let's try that here. Does that work with that? What? No, that doesn't. That doesn't. I'm going to stop doing that because it's just wasting time. So here we go. Old Book of Law is back. And we put the actions back onto Daisy, so she gets her 3 actions, and she gets the extra tome action as well. Got 2 resources, and I think that's the end of the Upkeep Phase. It's time to move on to the Mythos Phase in turn 2. Well, no, Mythos Phase will be turn 3. Here we go. We're in the Mythos Phase, so we now have 2 Doom. There's 1 Doom to go. This would be a great time to bring out the Arcane Initiative if we had it, but we don't, so we won't be doing that. And then let's see what the Encounter deck has for us. The Encounter deck has the Icy Ghoul in the cellar. Wow. Yes, now in this case, the Icy Ghoul does spawn in the cellar, because the cellar now does exist. Maybe if we'd just stayed in the study a little bit longer. But anyway, that's going to make the study quite difficult because the Icy Ghoul is not the easiest of creatures to evade or fight. With 4 evasion, that's pretty much out of the pretty much impossible for Daisy as she is. So it is going to be a prospect of fighting the Icy Ghoul, which will give us an extra victory. So the Cellar is going to be tough. It's got a 4 Shroud, and now we've got the Icy Ghoul, so it's going to be quite a challenge. He does 2 health damage in particular, which is not good for Daisy. So I think we're going to have to think about how we deal with that. It's probably likely we're going to need the shriveling, but unfortunately we really needed the shriveling for the Ghoul Priest. So some very tough decisions are going to have to be made here about what we do. Yes, so there we go. Okay. Alright. So that's the Mythos phase. Move on to the Investigation phase. Alright. Well, I think the first thing that we will do is exhaust the elbow. Is there an exhaust? There is. F7 is exhaust. That's what I should be using. F7. So we exhaust the old Book of Law. Draw 3. 1, 2, 3. Well, that one we definitely don't want. This one actually is exactly what we probably need. And whilst we can use that for the Ghoul Priest, I think we're going to need that Blinding Light. So of the 3, I'm not a big fan of scrying. I know you can look at top 3 cards of decks. It is helpful with Drawn to the Flame, because then you can be more predictive in terms of what you're going to draw. At this stage, I feel like Blinding Light is the card that we need. If not now, then a little bit later. If we hope to rather than fight the Icy Ghoul, we hope to evade the Icy Ghoul. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to put those back in, and I'm going to shuffle. So that's our first action. The old Book of Law really is so incredibly helpful. That was our tome action. So our first normal action, yes, William, is to move to the attic. So we'll flip the attic. After you enter the attic, you take a horror. So we'll take a horror. There we go. And we get 2 clues on here. 2 clues on the attic. It's only got 1 shroud. This is a, well, usually a walk in the park. So we've got 2 more actions here. I really don't need any help with things like deduction and things here. So I've got to think about what we bring out. Whether we bring things out at this stage. I'm feeling like we should. So we're not going to spawn the Flesh Eater here. The Flesh Eater is gone, but we could spawn a regular ghoul, and we're not really equipped to fight at the moment. Whilst I don't want to use the shriveling, I also recognise we don't have a knife or anything like that, so I'm inclined to do that once I've done another investigation and we've got enough resources to do it. So with that in mind, let's do another action. let's investigate 1 versus 6. So really it's just an auto fail that would not be helpful. We've already had 2, so we can't have any more, surely. Of course we can. Chaos Bag says -4. This has got to be one of the worst Chaos Bags draws that I think I've ever had. I haven't got the right Chaos Bag, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure I have. But anyway, so -4 from the Chaos Bag, which is fine. There we go. So that's a clue and a resource. And then I think what we'll do is I don't want to be left without any way of dealing with any kind of enemy. I'm going to bring out the Shriveling. So we bring Shriveling to the table. And we'll put 4 charges on it. There we go. So we've got 4 charges on the Shriveling. So that's our turn. So in turn 3 we drew the Blinding Light. We moved up to the attic. We found a clue, gave us a resource, and then we brought out the Shriveling. So I'm feeling a bit more comfortable. The only thing I'd say with Shriveling and indeed Blinding Light is it is helpful if we have some way of boosting our willpower, which is still only at 3. Arcane Studies is one way, but we don't have any resources for that. So the other way is obviously through the Rosary Beads, which is a very, very nice way of getting that extra boost. Because we don't really have a lot of other ways to boost our willpower at the moment, but we don't have the resources either. The other thing is, if Crypt Chill comes out, we've got a few things we can, you know, if Milan Christopher had to go, he'd go. I guess I don't want to get rid of Shriveling or the old Book of Law. So I think we're okay. We're doing all right. That was the final action. So things are going okay for Daisy Walker. I'm still really worried about this Icy Ghoul. Really need to make sure that we can deal with him when the time comes. So let's see how we go. So Enemy Phase, Icy Ghoul doesn't move. Icy Ghoul just sits menacingly in the cellar. So no other actions from an enemy perspective. Next one is the Upkeep Phase. So the whole Book of Law writes itself. That's very nice that it does that. I didn't realise. So there we go. Got the resource, and we drew Hyper Awareness. So again, these cards, in theory, Hyper Awareness and Arcane Studies are great cards in theory, but the problem in practice, as many of you would know, is that they require resources to really make them fire. And the problem in solo games in particular, where there's not, I mean there's some clues, but there's not a billion clues jumping around. Like if we were playing this game with 2 investigators, would be twice as many clues. It makes it hard to use them to fuel your boosts in that way, because you have to pay for them. So you need 2 resources to start with, and then once you've used the 2 resources, you need further resources. So they can sit in your hand and not get used. And this is a classic example of where, you know, I have 1 resource. Yes, I'll gain another resource when I investigate. But then if I bring out Arcane Studies, I can't use it. And the only way I can then use it is to, I suppose, you know, I'll be adding +1 or something like that. And then is it Arcane Studies or Hyper Awareness, which is the better of the 2? And we get into these sorts of arguments about what's the best way to deal with it. Hyper Awareness feels especially egregious because we don't need it for the intellect. We're at 2 evasion, whereas at least with Blinding Light we can be at 3+ with Arcane Studies. So Hyper Awareness feels like the worst of the 2 it's probably better used for if we really need to evade something like that. But anyway, that's the way that it is. So that's our upkeep phase. So let's move on to the Mythos phase, and this is 3, so the Mythos phase actually flips. Here we go. So we'll take the Doom off here. Mythos phase flips. Yeah, here we go. So your house continues to change before your very eyes. I'm assuming they mean by that not, putting on a hat and changing one's trousers or something. I think they mean change, that, changing as in the walls are changing and the floors are changing. The walls have decayed and the ground in many rooms has turned to dirt. It's almost as if you've been transported somewhere else entirely, though every now and again you recognise elements of your former home. Book here, kettle there, that kind of thing. Lead's investigator must decide. Either each investigator discards 1 card at random from his or her hand, or we take 2 horror. Now, we've got quite a lot of cards in our hand. A number of the cards are fairly inconsequential, I would say. So we've got hyper awareness. If we lose that, no big deal. Magnifying glass, no big deal. So do we do that, or do we take 2 horror, because Milan Christopher can rock one of them and we can rock one of them, and it's no big deal. I think the either, because what I don't want to do is, based on what the Chaos token keeps doing, the last thing I want to do is lose Blinding Light. It's not a risk I'm prepared to take, so I'm going to take the horror. The horror. Okay. So we take 1. Milan takes 1. We take the 2 horror. Done. Move on. So now we're in the rise of the ghouls. The floor beneath you is giving way, and you see a vast network of tunnels twisting into the darkness below. Shapes and silhouettes of strange creatures move swiftly through the tunnels, trying to find a way up. You probably don't want to be here when they do. Exactly. So here we are. We've got 7 now. 7 turns, so we've got a bit of time to keep going. So that's that piece, and now we've got to draw from the encounter deck. So here we go, and we get Ancient Evils. So I love the way I just talked about time, and there we go, we get Ancient Evils. So let's just put a Doom on here, add a Doom. We add a Doom to there. Okay, so that's sped things up slightly, but not massively. So there we go. That's the Mythos phase. Move on to our investigation phase. So what do I want to achieve here? Well, obviously I want to get a clue, but I need to put myself in a position where I can deal with this icy ghoul, either by evasion or by killing the icy ghoul. Now I could use a shriveling to help me do that, which essentially, best case, I use 2 of my shriveling to kill the icy ghoul. The problem is there's only 1 shriveling in this deck, so once shriveling's done, it's done. So that's a little bit problematic, because we need to deal with the Ghoul Priest at a later date. The other way, of course, is to Blinding Light, use Blinding Light, but then that's more difficult because we're only at 3 willpower versus a 4, so we would need to be able to boost our willpower. At the moment, that's not not really something we can do particularly effectively unless we have arcane studies or something else. So I think we need to get ourselves in a better position before we start running into the cellar. But the first thing we should do, and I should have done this during the upkeep, is put some actions here on and the resource. So the first thing we're going to do is the tome. So we're going to exhaust the tome. So we exhaust the tome, yes, and we draw 3 cards. 1, 2, 3. Interesting. So water protection, flashlight, and scrying. Of those 3 cards, the water protection is the best. We don't need that. Scrying. Oh, I don't know about scrying. Sometimes I think it's a great card, other times not. But water protection is always a good card. It's got a question mark, so it can represent any pip. So it's flexible from that perspective. Also, if there's a nasty card, so if we got particularly not Rotting Remains, but Grasping Hands, that could be quite nasty for us because we're only on 5 health. So that kind of thing. So it's a really great card, and I'm going to take that. Put the other 2 back. Shuffle the deck. Okay, so that's that. So what I mean, I suppose water protection is a willpowery kind of card. I think I'm going to. I really like the beads. What are they called? The rosary beads. I don't think they're not out at the moment. So I think we'll see how we go. But the first thing we're going to do is we need extra resources if we're going to do anything. And then we've got to decide whether we bring out arcane studies or medical text, which allows us to essentially heal ourselves, which actually will be helpful as well. So let's, for our first action, let's investigate Chaos Bag. I'm starting to wonder what's in this Chaos Bag. I haven't. Let me check. Yeah, everything's in there. Absolutely. Alright, so we get -2 if there's a ghoul enemy. There isn't, thank goodness. So we succeed, we get the clue. We get the 2 clues. So that's a victory point on that. We get a resource. So we get the resource. So right. So we've got a couple more goes to decide what we're going to do. That gets a victory, so I'm just going to put something on that. I'm going to put a little damage chip on it. That's just to let me know that I've got a victory point there, so we're in a good spot from that perspective. So now we've got to decide what we're going to do. We've got 2 more goes. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got 8 cards, so we're going to start losing some of these cards. Not that there's quite a few cards here that it won't matter if we lose them. Yes, so I think because we probably do need to find ways to boost our willpower in particular. I think that's more important than trying to boost our, or is it? Should we be boosting our evasion? Or do we use it to bring out medical texts, which allows us to heal? I don't think we need that at the moment, to be honest. damage. Or do I draw more cards? Don't know. I really need to make sure I'm in a better spot, so I'm going, oops, so my next action, I'm going to draw 2, and I'm going to bring out Arcane Studies. I'm concerned I've got some willpower checks coming up, and then just for my third go, so I can boost it, I'm going to take a resource. Feels like I'm not done very much this go, but I feel like I need to start setting myself up so that I can deal with whatever might happen. And I've got the time at the moment, as long as nothing nasty from the encounter deck comes out. But I really need to be in a position where I can, if I've got enough resources, I can blinding light the Icy Ghoul. Icy Ghoul, perhaps get a clue and get out, or something to that effect. So I know I'm going to stay in the attic. There's no reason. I don't want to start. If you're going to spawn some acolytes and things, I would rather they spawn in the attic rather than in the hallway. So I'm going to stay where I am at the moment, and I might take another go to get myself organised a little bit more as well. See how we go. So that's our go. So we now have Arcane Studies on the table, which will allow us with our willpower boost. We have 1 resource, so we do need to boost our willpower if we're taking some kind of grasping hands or rotting remains. We can deal with that. We also have that there for later when we perhaps need to use shriveling. We've got a way to boost our willpower as well, as long as we've got the resources. So actually getting some extra resources through emergency cash might be helpful moving forward. Perhaps I should have kept the emergency cash, but anyway, that's where we're at the moment. So we're in a very interesting position. Let's move forward. Enema Phase, there are no enemas to have to deal with because the Icy Ghoul isn't going anywhere. Upkeep Phase, here we go. Speak of the devil, here's emergency cash at exactly the right time. So that's going to be super helpful, because that will allow us to fuel our Arcane Studies. Fuel our Arcane Studies, fuel our willpower, which we can use our blinding light and things in that way. So that's good that we got that. Let's put some actions. An extra action there on Daisy Walker, and I think that's all for that phase. I think we're ready to move on to the next phase, which is the Mythos Phase. So now we've got 2 doom. We've still got 5 more turns before this turns. We need 3 resources, and we have 2 of them. We need to get the 3rd one from the cellar. I think the best thing is that we don't try and fight the Icy Ghoul, I'm afraid. It's better that we avoid that, even though the victory point would be nice. I think we have to be realistic about what we can achieve with this kind of starter deck, which is quite punishing in the sense that you've only got 1 of things like shriveling. Oh, before I forget, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, I've only got 8, so I'm okay. I didn't need to discard any. So let's do the encounter. Encounter deck says, aha, here we go, grasping hands. Test 3. For each point you fail by, take a damage. So here we go. We're at a 2. So maybe maybe we should have brought out hyper awareness instead. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pitch hyper awareness. There we go. Hyper awareness is going. So hyper awareness gives us a 3. It's a 3 versus a 3. And the chaos bag says -1. So we take 1 damage, which is not too bad. So let's put a damage on here on Daisy, so she takes damage from grasping hands. Ouch! Could have been worse, could have been 3 damage. Wasn't. Okay, so there we go. There we go. Alright, so moving along, we're back to the Investigator Phase. Let's have a look at what we draw. 1, 2, and 3. So we get the knife. We get, oh, this is a tough choice here. Ah, man. Whew, it's 3 good cards, because Manual Dexterity is a good card because that boosts us up to 4. But having said that, that would only allow us an equal, to get us up to equal with the Icy Ghoul. Daisy's tote bag is great because, well, if nothing else, just in terms of the pips, with a willpower and an intellect, and then a wild card icon. And then knife is pretty good as well, because that's a cheap way of bringing out a weapon which would allow us to fight. And to be honest, fighting the Icy Ghoul, 3, yeah, might be, what's the Ghoul Priest for? Fighting the Icy Ghoul might be something we need to do. That's more likely to succeed, I think. Yes, it's more likely to succeed than trying to evade. Of the 3, I think I'm inclined to take the knife. Yes. Okay, so here we go. So that was our tome. So, so the Icy Ghoul 3. So what do we do? I think, okay, I'm just going to be more readying things here. I think we, first action, we play our emergency cache. So we get 3 resources. I think we, for our second action, we bring out the knife. Can we do that? We got used up all our hand slots. Let's see. No, we're fine. Okay, so there we are. We have the knife out, which will at least help us so that we don't need to. So there's a couple of things here. We don't need to use the scrying. If we get Crypt Chill, we can throw away the knife as well. So we've got a couple of options from that perspective. In that way. And for our third action, so we've got a couple of options here. We could either move so we can get ready to fight the Icy Ghoul, or we could, because what I'm thinking is we could maybe use 1 shriveling and then we could discard the knife and try and kill him that way, because that would give us 4 versus 3, maybe even 5 versus 3, so we could dispatch him that way. So I'm feeling like that might be a good idea. And then if we do take some damage, then I suppose medical text could help us before we move on to the next phase. I think we're going to have to give this a go. I'm just prefer that blinding light we can use against the Ghoul Priest to get to Leader Chandler. Otherwise we're sort of looking at things like attacks of opportunity, which I'd really not like to do. So I think it's going to be a fight idea with the Icy Ghoul. So let's move. I feel like we're in a better position to deal with the Icy Ghoul than we were before. We've got a few options in that way. So let's see how we go. So that's our 3 actions. That's done. Let's move forward. The Enema Phase, there's no enemies to speak of. Next phase is the Upkeep Phase, and we draw manual dexterity. Nice card to get. That this does give us an evasion of 4 and a card draw. So that's another option that we can employ if we really have to, because we could pitch in those to boost us up to 5 if we needed to. Water protection is very nice from that perspective. So we're getting a few options. The important thing is having different options. I think I'm going to be, I think we should try and kill the Icy Ghoul, because it would be good to get all of the clues for more resources, but also obviously the victory points as well. And we've got time at the moment. We're not running out of time. So that's the Upkeep Phase. Let's put actions. 3 actions and a tome action onto Daisy. I think we're ready to roll. Alright, next phase is the Mythos Phase, so we're up to 3, well, sort of halfway through. And then let's take a encounter, which is another ghoul. This is a ghoul minion, so not too terrible. 2/2/2 for this ghoul minion. So we'll put him in our threat area. I use this red area as our threat area. Okay, so we've got some options here about how to deal with the ghoul minion. So it's back onto our phase. So we've got to deal with the ghoul minion. 2 fight, 2 evade. So we have a couple of choices here. We can either look to defeat the ghoul minion. So he's at 2. We are at 3. So we could look to try to defeat the ghoul minion this turn, assuming that it may not work out the way we like. I don't want to use my shriveling on the ghoul minion, so we would be fighting 3 versus 2. The other way to do it would be to evade the ghoul minion, so that would be a 2 versus, say, a 4 with the manual dexterity, which would then draw us a card, and then we could either then look to kill the ghoul minion, or we could move and attack the ice, or move into the Icy Ghoul. I think we need 3 turns if we're going to deal with the Icy Ghoul. So we need to be able to move and then attack or evade and have a couple of goes at that. If we spend a go dealing with the ghoul minion, we're setting ourselves up for taking damage, which I don't want to do. So yes, I think what do we want to do? I wouldn't mind drawing another card. So what I might do in the first instance is try to evade. Or do I just try and attack? Maybe what I do is I see if I can, because it's only a 2. So if I use the knife, it's 3 versus 2. if I can get a couple of hits in, then I don't need to waste. So let's give that a go. So let's use the old knife. Am I going to pitch anything in for this? Definitely not going to do that with medical texts, but do I use the order protection? No, I'm not going to. I'm going to just straight up fight with a +1, so that's a 3 knife versus 2, so I need a -1 or better. Okay, so our first action. First action, let's go. Chaos Bag says 0. Wow. Hit. We just do 1 point of damage, obviously. So there we go. That's damage on the ghoul. So we slash at him with the knife. Well, if that's the case, let's do it again. This is incredible. And we go, Chaos Bag says... This Chaos Bag has been messing with me, seriously. So that is +0, but if you succeed, draw 1 card for each time you control. I do succeed, so let's just get this. So first of all, I succeed. Sorry, that's the doom, that should have been a damage. So the ghoul minion is dead. Amazing. So the ghoul minion dies. We succeeded. So we draw a card for each tome. We've got a tome, so we get a card. And we get Daisy's tote bag. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cards. So we drew a tome. So that was quite amazing that we did that. Oh boy, that was incredible. So there we go. For my extra action now, I'm going to exhaust the Book of Law. 3, 1, 2, 3. Man, fearless. Well, we don't need to heal any horror at the moment, so I'm taking that, moving those into here. Okay. Incredible. For my third go, this is a no-brainer. I'm going to spend 2 and bring out the Holy Rosary. We're really getting quite a... We've got 2 hand slots, we've got an Arcane slot, and we've got Holy Rosary slot. So we're certainly filling up the slots. 17 cards, we haven't had any weaknesses, so this is worrying me because that means there are 2 weaknesses in 17 cards. So that's a 1 in 8 chance that a weakness will be drawn, and our weakness is a really nasty weakness. So, yeah, so there we go. So we're now rocking +1 intellect and +1 willpower. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cards in our hand. I think it's now probably, I think we need to probably think about tackling the Icy Ghoul and getting this extra resource next go. Okay, well that was a very successful round. Let's move on to the Enemy Phase. Nothing happening there. Then we've got the Upkeep Phase. Yes. We've got to remove one of these. Well, that's not a difficult task. We're not going to use the flashlight. We've got our hands already. So we select the flashlight. Think of all of them. That's the one I would probably take out. Yes. What did we draw then? Oh, it was the flashlight that we drew. Did I not shuffle these? I mustn't have... I didn't shuffle them, did I? Oh dear. I thought I'd shuffled the deck. Oh dear, I just realised I didn't. My apologies there. I just sort of assumed it automatically had shuffled them and it hadn't. So, anyway... That's okay, too late now, I'll just have to move on. So my apologies for that oversight. Again, if you're madly typing away, you didn't shuffle the deck! I didn't shuffle the deck, so I do apologise. Just have to let that one go by. I'm sure with every single time I play this, I'll make an error, and there's my error right there. My apologies. So I've shuffled the deck now. Something I must remember to do in future. Okay, let's move on to the Mythos Phase. So we're up to 4. So we're over halfway now. Let's see what the encounter deck has to say. And I really am getting a lot of ghouls. This is my least favourite ghoul. The Ravenous Ghoul, you get no victory points. He's quite nasty. Thank goodness we've got everything out. We really are getting ghouled. So that's my fault for, this is the punishment for not shuffling the deck properly. So here we go. We've got a Ravenous Ghoul. Okay, so it's our turn. Right. So again, this gentleman here, you can call him that, is a 3 fight. So we can also do a 3 fight as well, and he's also 3 health. And he's 3 evade. So we could do an evasion. But I'm going to try and do what we did with the last ghoul, which was to dispatch them with the knife, which seemed to work amazingly well. Is it going to work as well this time? Because basically we need to, which we haven't put on here, 3 actions and a resource. Yep. So let's see how we go here. The other thing would be again to evade. The problem is we evade the ghoul, we move, and then we would need to try and evade the icy ghoul. So we would need to we'd need to evade, and then we'd be using cards for evasion. So I'm actually more inclined to try and fight instead. So let's see how we go. Okay, so again, it's a 3. Oh, this time it's a 3 versus a 3. Last time it was 3 versus 2, so this is much worse. 3. Oh dear, oh dear. What are we going to do? It's the evasion. Evasion is 3. Because the knife, it's 3 versus 3, and that's not great. So then we're really staring down the barrel of trying to boost that, or we use our shriveling. So we use our shriveling, which would be a 4 versus 3. Which it could boost up to 5 versus 3. Yes, I think I'm going to have to. I'm not going to risk it. I'm going to play a shriveling. So I'm going to shrivel the Ghoul Priest for the first action, and I'm going to pitch in the Water Protection as a willpower. So that gives us 3, 4, 5. And yes, let's also make it 6. So let's make it a 6. A 6 versus a 3. So it's -3 or better. So we've spent a resource to increase our willpower with this as well. So we're now at 6 versus 3. -3 or better. And we get -2, but we do take a damage in the process, which is not great. we succeeded. So just on that, oh, and also we try plug it, so we take a horror as well. So we'll take a horror, yep, as well. If only we were playing with Agnes. But that means we do 2 damage. So we do 2 damage. So we took a horror and we took a damage, and it took 2 damage. Yes. So that was our first go. Now we have a choice here. He needs another damage, so we only need to do 1 more damage. So I don't want to use shriveling again. We could do the knife. Let's see if we can boost the knife. But the knife, then we're a 2. He's a 3. So the best we could make it is a 3 versus a 3. Whereas if we discard the knife, that gives us 4. We could make that a 5 versus a 3. I think I'm going to do that. I don't have a lot of choices here. So if I second action, I'm going to throw the knife, and I'm going to use Daisy's tote bag on fight as well. So we get +3 fight, which gives us 5 versus 3. 2, 3, 5. 5 versus 3. Chaos Bag says yes, that's -1 for any number of ghoul enemies. There's 1 ghoul enemy, so success. That's a success. The Ravenous Ghoul is dead. For someone who doesn't fight much, we're doing an awful lot of fighting. So that was our second turn. For our third turn, we are going to exhaust the Book of Lore, draw 3. Well, we don't want the Necronomicon, that's for sure. Barricade, not much help in this one, to be honest. I mean, it's a 3-pip, so it's got lots of options. This one is better because we might need this, so let's take that. Let's put these in and shuffle the deck. Yes, and shuffle the deck. Okay, so then for our third turn, I think that's right because we fought, then we did the tome. So we've got a third term here. Third turn, not term. Our third turn is there. We can't bring out medical texts, and we've now got rid of the tote bag, so because we've got now we don't have 2 hand slots. So I think it would be worthwhile spending 2 bringing out the medical texts, because quite frankly we need to heal some damage because we're low on damage. So that's our turn. That's our turn. Okay. Alright, so at the end of turn 7 for the investigation phase, we've dispatched another ghoul. We've got lots of things out. We've had to use one of our shriveling. What we need to do now is we need to really, if possible, we just need one clue, and then we can then get back to the hallway and work out how we're going to deal with the Ghoul Priest, and possibly get Leader Chandler on board as well. So, okay. Next turn, no enemies to speak of. Upkeep phase, we draw a Perception, which I think is a great card for. We really need to make sure that we parlay with Leader Chandler as well as we can. as soon as we can. So that's a good card to get. We're really in an interesting place here. We really need to spend as little time in the cellar as we possibly can. Let's see how we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards, so we're fine from that perspective. It is now time to move on. We now have 5 Doom on the Rise of the Ghouls, so time is moving on. We need to get moving. Let's see what the encounter deck says. Counter deck gives us Rotting Remains. This is test 3. For each point you fail by, take a horror. Okay, so it's test 3. We have a willpower of 4 because we have the rosary out. So it's a 4 versus a 3. Do we make it a 5 versus a 3? I think it should be okay. I think. No, I feel like we should, because we don't really need to spend. Yeah, I'm gonna make it 5. So that's 5. 5 versus 3. Chaos says. Another one. So that's 3. We take 3 horror for that. I think my understanding is that's the maximum that you take. Or is that a -4? Let me just double check. Sorry, I should know this, but it happens so rarely. When you draw a tentacle token with a skill test failure, I think it's 3, isn't it? I think so. I'm just looking it up. I do apologise for this. I should know these things, but like I said, it happens so. It's a 0. Yeah. So that means that it's considered 0 and you get the 3 horror. Yes, I know you're all screaming at me and typing things in. So I take 3 horror. So yes, I'm afraid Malign Christopher is going to take 1 of the horror. The horror. So he's gone. No. What am I doing? No. The Holy Rosary is going to take a horror. So that's 1 of the horror. And we are going to take 2 of the horror. So we're up to 5. So we're up to 5 horror. Yeah, no, I want to keep Malign Christopher as long as I can. Sorry, I'd forgotten I had the Holy Rosary. So there we go. That was a very nasty. Oh, poor old Daisy is really, she's actually holding up pretty well considering. So there we go. All right, that's that phase. So I do apologise for, again, I should know that. I should know that it's automatically a 0, but I just had one of those moments where I just wanted to double check that it's correct. So yes, let's move on. I should put my actions here, 1, 2, 3, and the additional action. Okay, so investigation phase, here we go. What are we going to do? Well, the first thing we're going to do, which we always do, is, well, we have a choice now. We can either draw another card, because we're down to 3. I mean, Malign Christopher can take a hit for us, but we're really down to 3. So we've got a choice here. We either move and then engage with the Icy Ghoul. Try and evade or fight the Icy Ghoul. And I think evasion is probably a better tactic. because we can use mind over matter. He does 2 damage, so I'm thinking, yes, let's use our tome first of all for medical text. Test 2, we're 6. 2 versus 6, let's just do it. 2 versus 6. It's a -2. There isn't. So we succeed, and if you succeed, heal a damage. So that's a heal. So that's the first thing we do. For our second action, we are indeed going to move into the cellar. The cellar flips. It gets 2 clues on it. Just move that out of the way. There's the 2 clues. We now have the Icy Ghoul on us. We've got 2 turns to deal with the Icy Ghoul. So, do we hit the Icy Ghoul? So we could hit the Icy Ghoul for damage. So we could, or we could evade the Icy Ghoul and do a fast play. No, we can't. We've only got 1 resource, so we can't do a fast play. It's unfortunate. Okay, I think we spend the 1. We use mind over matter, which allows us to use our intellect instead of fight or evade. We evasion of 4. We have a 6. We have an intellect of 6. We make that 8. So we pitch that. So that gives us 8. That's not right. 5, 6, 7, 8. Best play during it until the end of the round. You may use your intellect instead of your evade. Okay, fight or evade. So we're evading with an 8 versus a 4. Chaos Bag says Elder Sign, which means we obviously succeed. Now we've succeeded. Put these away. When we succeed, we draw a card because of perception. Because we drew an Elder Sign, we also draw a card for each tome, and we have 2 tomes, so we draw 2 more cards, and there it is. And indeed, the Icy Ghoul exhausted, and that was an action. So we have 1 action left, but however, before we do that, we have to deal with this weakness, which was going to come one way or the other. That's the last one. Let me just get rid of that. Okay, so this is a horrible weakness. Draw the top card of the encounter deck, and also another one. So the first one is a swarm of rats. We are fighting Daisy today. So we get a swarm of rats, and we also get Grasping Hands. Test 3 for each point you fell by, take a damage. So that's 2. Let's make it a 4. So 4 versus 3. Okay, use that. Okay, 4 versus 3. Chaos Token says, yes, we do it. Yes, I draw a card. Oh my god. Oh. It's like cycling card drawing here. Okay. So, oh my goodness, we survived that. Okay, so we've got the exhausted Icy Ghoul here. Now we either do we take an attack of opportunity and do a deduction, or do we kill these rats? we don't want to have to deal with 2 enemies next go, so I think we look to kill these rats because it's a 1. We're a 2, so I think we do 1 versus 2. Is there anything we could blinding light them, actually? Is that better? Do we try and blinding light them? Oh boy, 1, and we are a 2. So -1 or better is not great. We shrivel them? That feels like a waste of a shriveling. We can't blinding light them anyway, we don't have the resources, so we can't use that. So either we evade them or we fight them. Or we take an attack of opportunity, but then the problem is we'll have 2 of them on us next go, which we could have anyway, because boy, this is really tough. This is really, really, really tough. I think we can't afford to not kill these pesky creatures, so I think we're going to have to go with a shriveling. I really don't like to do it, but so we're a 3, 4. We can't spend any more with the arcane studies, so it's a 4 versus a 1. Chaos Bag says -1. We didn't fail. Rats are dead. But we take a horror. It's nasty. We really need that fearless. Okay. So that was our 3 turns. So unfortunately, we didn't get to do what we needed to do thanks to that horrible weakness. We're still going to have to deal with the Icy Ghoul again. We've now only got 2 shriveling. Things are looking a little bit challenging, to say the least. Anyway, let's move on. There's an enemy phase, no enemies. Upkeep phase, again the Icy Ghoul is in our threat area. We get the research librarian, who I think it's going to be some kind of soak for us. I'm going to need to use him as for that. We got a resource. I think that's put the actions on Daisy again, so she gets her tome action and 3 normal actions, and then we move through to the turn 9. So the agenda hasn't flipped yet. This is the last turn, the witching hour, before it flips. So let's see how we go with the encounter deck. Encounter deck is Frozen in Fear. Move, fire, evade, costs an additional action. That's a really unfortunate time to get that. Yeah. So there we go. So we're Frozen in Fear, which limits what we can do. Because whatever we do will take 2 turns. So we essentially have 2 goes. We still have a time go, but we have 2 goes. Okay. Okay, it's our phase. We still haven't. We're back to the Icy Ghoul again. So either we blinding light the Icy Ghoul, and use 2 turns to evade, and then get the 2 clues, and then we're going to have to evade again. Or we try and fight the Icy Ghoul 3 versus 2, or we would use up our shriveling essentially to kill the Icy Ghoul. So we either use up all our shriveling and then we're relying on fight for the Ghoul Priest, which is pretty horrendous, or we pitch everything we've got and we evade. And then the problem with that is if we don't have 2 resources. The problem then is we're going to have to evade again, probably. So I think fighting is less likely to succeed at this stage, just looking at what we have in front of us. We're much more likely to succeed in an invasion, so let's do it. Let's bring out the manual dexterity and the research librarian. So 3, so that gives us an evasion of 5. 5 versus 4. Okay. Let's see how we go. 5 versus 4. So for our first action, it's a 5 versus a 4. Chaos Bag says, oh, thank God, -1. Yes, we did it. 5 versus 4. We draw a card. Flashlight. Ghoul Priest once again is exhausted. That's 2 of our turns gone because we're frozen in fear. We can now do this, which will the law, or book of law. So 1, 2, 3. Necronomicon, no. Scrying, no. Forbidden knowledge. None of these are great, to be honest. I think we'll bring out the forbidden knowledge and we'll put these in and shuffle the deck because we're getting down to a very low number of cards. Okay, we have 1 action left. We are going to investigate. We've got to get this clue. So we are 6, 7, 8. Alright, 8 versus. Oh, actually, do we want to? No, I want to keep these for later. We're going to need that. 8 versus 4. Chaos Bag says +1, successful. So we get 2 clues, which means we were successful. We get a resource. So we get a resource. That's our go. So excellent. We have all our resources now. We now have 2 victory points. So that's something. It's taken a while though. Things are not looking that flash. That really frozen fear. Oh, speaking of which, it's a 3 versus a 3 versus 4, frozen in fear. Movement is not. Is 3 versus 4. Do you want to use anything? I don't want to use that. So 3 versus 4. We need the 2 resources for that, but we'll get a resource back. So I'm going to use 1 resource to make it 3 versus 5. 3 versus 5. Chaos Bag says -2. Thank God we did that. Thank goodness. So we succeeded. Frozen in fear is gone. Okay, so that's the end of our turn. Enemy phase. No, no enemy phase. Good old upkeep phase. Yep. The old Icy Ghoul is back. We got a Fearless, so that's something. Yes, so there we go. So we then move on to the Mythos phase. The Mythos now flips. So this now flips. And this says a feral beast, he roughly humanoid and with a canine cast, and it tears through the ground in front of you. Below the floor, you can see vast tunnels beneath your house. Fiendish howling echoes from deep within the unknown cover. Shuffle the encounter deck, discard palette into the encounter deck. Discard from the top until a ghoul enemy is discarded. The lead investigator draws that enemy. So these, shuffle them into the encounter deck. Yep. Then we draw these until we get, so draw these until a ghoul enemy is discarded. There we go, and it's the Flesh Eater back in the attic. So, well, there we go. He can stay there. I'm not going to try and get the victory point. So there we go. Okay. So, yeah, so we've now got 10 goes. You hear Craze howl outside, and suddenly all the creatures turn their attention to that sound. They rush to escape the house, breaking down doors and clawing at everything in their way. At the end of the enemy phase, each unengaged ghoul enemy moves one location towards the parlour. At the end of the round, place one doom on this agenda for each ghoul enemy in the hallway or parlour. Okay, so shit's getting super real now. That's the we now draw an encounter card. And indeed, it's place a doom on the. So we'll add a doom to that. I can't remember if I better just check whether I shuffled this encounter deck. I probably did shuffle it, but I'm going to shuffle it anyway. Never sure when it's shuffling, when it's not. So there we go. Okay, so that's the end of that. So we really don't want to be around. We really need to get moving now. So it's now investigation phase. We are back here with our friend again, the Icy Ghoul. So we've got so the options are we fight the Icy Ghoul, which is unlikely to do much because if we're using fight, where 2, it's 3. So fighting is not really a great option at all. The other option is we evade the ghoul, 4 versus 2, and we no evasion. Really, the best thing we can do at this stage is to get out of there and leave the ghoul behind. It will unengaged will move a location towards the parlour, so that's going to start happening. This is going to start to get very nasty. So, but I think our main option here now is to use Blinding Light to evade him for now and get the hell out of here. We've then got to get to the end of the round, and then we need to, when does it say? At the end of the enemy phase. So I'm assuming if he's exhausted, he can't move. So he won't move this time, but he will move next time. So we haven't got a big window of time. I really wanted this for evading the Ghoul Priest because I'm not sure how we're going to do that with the cards that we have. We're really at a very... Oh, we use a Shriveling and kill him, but then we've used up our Shriveling. We've really used up all our fight. We've only got knives left. So, because how are we going to evade the Ghoul Priest? We've used up our other evasion pieces, or we would be left to fight the Ghoul Priest, which is not going to happen. Or we take an attack of opportunity and move. Oh, none of them are really good options, really. What to do? What to do? What to do? I think we're going to have to use the blinding light, I think, because that's probably the one way that we can actually make sure that we do okay here. So yeah, I'm just trying to think it through. Oh dear, this is yeah. So okay, let's do that. Let's go. Let's pay 2. I'm just going to have to work out. Okay, we pay 2. We pitch in the blinding spell. Uses willpower. If you succeed. Okay, so he's a 4. We are a 4 willpower. But we're going to pitch in fearless, so that gives us a 5. Yeah, I think that's the best we can do actually. So let's see how we go. So it's a 5 versus a 4. There we go. Chaos Bag says 0. We succeed. So we evade. He gets a damage on him. Oops, not a doom. A damage. We heal horror. So we heal a horror in the process. So we've evaded. Well, hold on. Sorry, I should have put these actions on here. 3. So that was the first action. For our second action, we move here. For our third action, we'll exhaust the old Book of Law and draw 3. Which do we take, the knife or the barricade? Oh my goodness. Because the barricade, both of these. So I think we're going to need the barricade, because if we're going to actually move into the parlour, we're going to need to barricade this. But we also need the knife. Let's... Oh. We got... Oh dear. We don't need... Oh, well... Okay. I think we need both, but I think at the moment I think I'm probably inclined to take the knife. Okay. And then for our final action, what are we going to do? Well, we can't bring out the knife. I think we take a resource. For a final action, we take a resource. Okay. Okay, I think we spend the 3 to advance. Yes, I think do we spend the 3 to advance? Yes, I think we do. I think we spend the 3 to advance. we advance this, we flip. The barrier is revealing the parlour. Leader Chandler goes into the parlour, so this is no longer locked. Spawn the Ghoul Priest in the hallway, so now we've got the Ghoul Priest on us. This is going to get really, really bad now. Oh dear. Okay, so we've got the Ghoul Priest. This is really nasty. Okay. Ghoul Priest in the hallway. Where's he? Hello? Well, I don't know. It's not here. So let me find the... Oh, here we go. Oh, it appeared. A woman with a torch stands in your parlour. A glimmer of hatred knows. What have you done with my barriers? She screams furious. Before you can answer, a ghastly wail sounds behind you, and a creature wearing robes and a deer skull mask tears through the wall, advancing towards you. So we've got to try and defeat the Ghoul Priest. Wonderful. Okay. I'm not holding up much hope here of us surviving all of this, but we'll see how we go. Okay. So the enemy phase now. At the end of the enemy phase, each unengaged ghoul enemy moves one location towards the parlour. So that's indeed what happens. So that moves one location. So we now have the Flesh Eater and the Ghoul Priest on us, which is wonderful. And then the Upkeep phase, the Icy Ghoul readies. Everything else readies. We get an extra resource, and now we get the Arcane Initiate, which is a little bit late. Oh dear. Okay. We put 3 actions on poor old Daisy, and the Tome action, so she's back where she is. Yep, and we're ready to move to the next phase, which is Mythos Phase. How are we going to go here? So 2 doom there. Let's see what. And at the end of the round, place 1 doom on the ninja for each ghoul enemy in the hallway. So 2 more doom on here. So there's now, because he's a ghoul as well, isn't he? Yes, they're both ghouls. So we're up to 4. Alright, let's see what the encounter deck has. It's got Rotting Remains, Test 3, Take Horror. So we are at a 4. Let's pitch this in. Let's make it a... Oh, do we want to do that? Or do we... Because we need as much as we can get there. So no, let's not do that. How about we just do a 3 versus a 4? What does the Chaos bag say? -1. Fine. Okay, we're all good. Okay. Here we are. Investigation phase. So, what do we do? So we can either move... so we've got Flesh Eater and the Ghoul Priest. The Ghoul Priest, I think we're going to have to just take the attack of opportunity at this first stage, because but this is not good. The Flesh Eater is only a 1, so we could look to evade the Flesh Eater, move, and then get Leader Chandler on board. Let's try and evade the Flesh Eater first of all. So it's a 1 versus a 2. A 1 versus a 2, and there's nothing we can pitch for that. So that's a 1 versus a 2. Chaos bag says no. -1, -2. So no. So I think then we just move, which means we take 4 horror and 3. So 4 horror, 1. So Milan Christopher dies. 1, 2. Then we take 2 more. 3. It's not adding horror. Let me add it this way. 1. So now we're up to 7 horror. Very nasty. Okay. So we are now, so that's 2 turns, sorry. That took 2 turns. So we have 1 turn now to attempt to parlay. It says here, I didn't flip it. Resign. So we could resign. Or we can try and parlay. If we fail the parlay, then we're gone anyway. Nothing wrong with resigning. If we don't resign, we've got Lita Chandler. She gets +1 fight, and so that would give us 3. So we could look at defeating the Ghoul Priest. I'm not feeling like, well, we've got two shriveling. So, and she's got a 3/3. So the problem is we're going to take 4. We're going to take attacks from these 2, which would be 4/3. We can take 1. No, because 4 horror, we can take 2 more horror. So I don't really see how we can do this. I'm just trying to think it through. We can't take 4 horror and 3 damage. We can take the 3 damage. We can't take 4 horror because Lita can't take 4 horror. We can take 2. Oh yes, and she could take 2. So we could actually do it. Just. No, because if I take 2 horror, I'm gone. So I can only take 1 horror. So we can't take any more damage from these 2 gentlemen here, these 2 Ghoul Priests. So our capacity to do that is very limited. So either I could probably get Lita Chandler, but the problem is if I then get Lita Chandler, then they will then attack on the next turn. They will do 4 horror, and then that's no good. So the other way would be to kill one of them, which is not possible to evade 1. So I'd have to do a 1 versus 2, which is probably unlikely. So I think the only solution here is to resign. This is too much for me. You run out of the door fleeing in panic. So Daisy, final action, resigns and runs out of the door fleeing in panic. So there we have Daisy Walker. Didn't quite do as well as Roland Banks. She really got... The problem is that unfortunately she got really sideswiped in the cellar. She also got... Her weakness was a particularly nasty one. So while she managed to get 2 victory points, for, as we would have expected, for investigating the cellar and the attic, she wasn't able to do, and she defeated a number of ghouls. That was the other thing. We got quite a number of, she ended up fighting a lot through the draw, which doesn't always happen, so that meant that we soaked up a lot of our fights, and a lot of our fighting actions in ways that meant that we couldn't use those later. It's really only ever going to work for Daisy if you can keep, particularly in the starter deck, if you can keep those shrivelings and things in reserve. In this case, we spent a lot of our resources and time just with the Icy Ghoul. The Icy Ghoul really locked us down, which was really unfortunate, which meant that we just weren't able to do what we needed to do in time by the end. But we didn't die. Can't say that all the investigators will get to that, but we didn't die. We had to resign, which was unfortunate. We ended up with 2 victory points, but we didn't end up. So we've got to decide. I'll be interested to hear what people have to say in terms of what happens to Daisy. Does she burn her house down or not? Personally, I think she's not going to burn a house down which has got books in it. I don't think she's that kind of a person. But anyway, I'll be interested to see, to hear what you have to say. Thank you very much for playing along with me. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you shortly with Skids O'Toole doing the same scenario. Thank you again, and goodbye.